Okay, it's 1 o'clock. We will begin the Planning Committee meeting of Akron City Council. We have a number of items that is up for a public hearing this afternoon. First of which I would like to ask if there's a motion to accept the minutes of the previously held meeting.
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Again, we have 4 items that's up for public hearing this afternoon. And the process is that we will first, and at this point, ask if there's anyone here that's going to wish to speak to the committee during the public hearing. If you could please stand and be sworn in by a representative of our law department. You just have to stand and say, I do. Be sworn in.
If you would, please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, say I do. Thank you.
Very good. So, given that, so the process is that we'll, the planning department will give us a recommendation on the conditional use request. Then what will happen is we'll open it up for public comment, at which point you'll be able to speak either in favor or against the proposal. After that, the committee then will ask questions, and then it'll be open to council to ask questions. Then this evening, in essence, we'll kind of do the same thing over. You'll get sworn in. You can testify before all of council at 7 o'clock. The only real difference is that the committee will then make a recommendation to all of council, either in favor, against, or to table the item, take time. So that's the procedure, okay? So with that, we'll go ahead and begin the public hearings. And the first item that's up for a public hearing today is number 1, an ordinance authorizing a conditional use to retain an overheight playhouse structure at 2169 Daniels Avenue.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, Lori Lennington and Scotty Stewart are requesting permission to retain an elevated playhouse with a peak height of 21 feet 3 inches. The elevated playhouse measures 22 feet by 16 feet for 352 square feet of area. It's sited 8 feet from the northwest corner of the property. Construction materials consist of slanted corrugated aluminum roof, board and batten blue siding with treated decking and wood railings. The playhouse was constructed by a local builder who did not realize the height of the structure needed city council approval in conjunction with the Make-A-Wish Foundation. Except for the height, the structure meets all other zoning code development requirements. This Ellet neighborhood property is well maintained, and the playhouse should not be intrusive to neighboring properties. Both Planning Commission recommends disapproval. Planning staff recommends approval.
Thank you very much, sir. Okay, very good. We'll now move on to the public hearing portion and ask if there's anyone here wishing to speak in favor of the conditional use request here at 2169 Daniels Avenue. If you'd like to speak in favor of this proposal, please feel free to step up, and if you could provide for us your name and address also.
Sure. My name is Mark Verdova. I'm with Pain & Pain Custom Home Builders. We're constructing the playhouse for Carson. My home address is 459 Dunwoody Drive, which is in Aurora. I think you did a very good job summarizing everything. We've been through some steps in the process, and I wanted to make sure to share an update with everyone that while this project did have some opposition from some neighbors, we did take the time. We met with the neighbors. We've come to an agreement with both of those neighbors. One of them has actually come today in support, but we now have their agreement that they don't oppose the project anymore. We're, as a builder, doing the right thing in terms of screening and water management to make sure that the neighbors are comfortable. And again, we request an approval going forward.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your comment.
Glad to answer any questions, or do I go back?
Cool, thank you. We may later. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else here wishing to speak in favor of the conditional use request?
Hi, my name's Tricia Kelly. I was one of the 2 neighbors who opposed the conditional use approval at the zoning hearing meeting last month. Since that meeting, I echo that the builder, Mark Verdova, has reached out to my neighbor and myself to try and come to an agreement over the future of the playhouse. I'm happy to say that my neighbors Jack and Joanne Clark and myself and my husband are pleased with what Mark has suggested in response to our concerns about water and snow maintenance and aesthetics, and we're confident that everything will be fulfilled. With that in mind, neither the Clarks nor myself are opposing the conditional use approval at this time, and we support council's approval of it so that Carson's wish can be fulfilled.
Thank you very much for coming down. Is there anyone else here wishing to speak in favor of the conditional use request? Anyone else wishing to speak in favor? Okay, very good. Is there anyone wishing to speak against the conditional use request at 2169 Daniels Avenue? Anyone against? Anyone? Okay, very good. We'll close the public hearing portion of this conditional use request and open up to the committee. Is there any questions from any committee members at this time? Any questions whatsoever? Any council members have any comments? Oh, Mr. Hoke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to say that I also am in approval of the conditional use for this playhouse, and thank the neighbors and the builder from Pain and Pain, getting together and ironing out any of the differences or of opinion or problems that they had with it, and being able to bring closure to this. The story behind this is that this was a playhouse that was designed and built. It was designed by Carson Stewart and built for him through the Make-A-Wish Foundation, and so this is what he chose through a number of different items that Make-A-Wish proposed to give him. Carson is cancer-free right now and is back in the saddle and back in school. He's went to his first Boy Scout summer camp out, and living the life of a normal 11-year-old, and looking forward to enjoying his playhouse for many years. And so would like to thank everybody again and appreciate what's been done. And Carson, thanks for coming down today. We appreciate it, and hope you enjoy your playhouse as soon as we get this through here for you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Hope. Very good story. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, very good. Hearing none, y'all are welcome back this evening. Again, at 7 o'clock, we'll have the second public hearing of the day, after which the committee will then make a recommendation. Okay? Thank you again for coming down. The second item that's up for public hearing today is ordinance authorizing conditional use to establish a child daycare business center at 1232 Honatl.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, Janice Wade is requesting permission to establish a child daycare business center at this location. Proposed daycare business center, known as Evening Dreams Child Care LLC, will be located on the main floor of the two-story, 1,464 square foot home. The daycare would be operated 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Petitioner plans on hiring an additional employee if approved. Property contains an enclosed outdoor play area. The petitioner stated that she's worked in the child care field for 20 years and has been provisionally approved by the state to operate a Type B home at this address. Proposed use should not be intrusive to the neighborhood. There is ample room for parking. The zoning staff has not received any complaints about the current Type A daycare home. Providing quality daycare services is beneficial to the entire city. Both Planning Commission and Planning staff recommend approval subject to conditions.
Thank you, Mr. Antonucci. At this point, we'd like to open it up, excuse me, for the public hearing portion. And if there's anyone here wishing to speak in favor of the conditional use request at 1232 Honatl Avenue, please feel free to step up if anyone's wishing to speak in favor. Okay. Did you get sworn in? Uh-oh. That's okay. We can still swear you in. All right. We have a representative from our law department who just so happens to take care of that for us.
Sure. Okay. Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give... Oh, we have one more. Okay. Ready? The testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. If so, say I do.
Anybody else who wishes to, yeah, please stand
Yeah,
up
please
at
go
this
ahead. Please
time.
stand. Okay, what we're going to do is all over again, okay,
Maybe we
guys?
should all stand and you can all
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, say I do. Great, thank you.
Thank you very much. No, you're welcome, ma'am. Please step forward.
Thank you. I'm Janice Wade, and I'm the one that lives at the 1232 Hinano. Only reason why I asked for this request is with the state, we're allowed 6 in a B home, and we're not allowed to overlap any children at any time. So in order for me to kind of help anybody else, then I need to ask the request for the 12 children due to zoning.
Very good.
Yeah, because like I have maybe about 5 children right now, and if somebody calls me for 2, I can't take them. That's the reason why I requested.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Is there anyone else here wishing to speak in favor of the conditional use request on Honolulu? Excuse me, anyone else in favor? Okay, is there anyone wishing to speak against the conditional use request at 1232 Honolulu? Anyone against? Anyone? Okay, seeing or hearing no one, we'll now move on to, is there any questions or comments from any committee members that reference this conditional use request for child daycare? Any questions? Any comments from any committee members? Yes, Ms. Sims.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Maybe you can answer the question. When they say overlap, is that for a certain period of time? Is it like an hour, or what the definition of that?
I don't know, that's, maybe the petitioner can answer that. I think I know, but if you could please come to the microphone. I think I know, but I'd rather have an expert answer.
Okay. Overlap, what I'm saying overlap is we're not allowed to have no more than 6 at one time.
That's what I thought.
If I bring anybody in over that time, say within the 2-hour period for the, because my kids always transitioning out at certain times. Like I have them transitioning out like at 2:30, 3:30, 4:30, and I can't bring anybody that needs to be at work or drop their kids off at 2:30.
So, okay, so is the overlap like a 2-hour period? Or
Yes,
just- okay.
approximately 2 hour.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very good. Mr. Swirsky?
I just want to thank you for offering an important service that's badly needed in our community. Appreciate it. Appreciate your initiative.
Thank you. Further questions or comments? Okay, very good. Hearing none, we'll invite you back this evening as well at 7. The third item that's up for public hearing is authorizing conditional use to construct a hospice home center at 475 North Howard. Mr. Antonucci.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. Grace House is requesting permission to construct a hospice home center for 6 individuals at this location. The single-story L-shaped building will contain 7,250 square feet of area. Construction materials will consist of a brick base, vinyl siding, and asphalt shingled roof. Proposed hospice home center will contain 6 private rooms, each with their own bathroom and sitting area. The building will also contain a dining and living room, kitchen, shower, and laundry area. There will be also space dedicated for 3 office areas, a meeting room, storage, and a reception area. The 12-space paved parking area is located along North Howard Street with ample landscaping. Grace House is a nonprofit organization dedicated to providing a hospice home center for dying patients who do not have a home or caregivers. Hospice care with medical staff and equipment will be provided separately by hospices, while Grace House staff will provide surrogate family services such as bathing, cooking, etc. Proposed hospice home center will be centrally located and in close proximity to the area hospitals. Use is compatible with surrounding uses, will provide a much-needed service. Both Planning Commission, planning staff recommend approval subject to conditions.
Thank you, sir. At this point, we'll open it up for public hearing. Is there anyone here wishing to speak in favor of the conditional use request at 475 North Howard Street to construct a hospice facility?
Hi, I'm Holly Klein. I'm the president of Grace House Akron. My address is 846 Chinook Avenue. I do have renderings, if you'd like to see
Yes, please.
pictures of the home.
Mr. Antonucci is the expert at the easel.
An expert with the easel.
Expert with the easel.
He's an easel expert.
Yes.
What you're looking at the top picture, the side entrance or the main entrance is on Olive Street, so that's the front of the home. And then the picture below is the back courtyard. It's situated on the corner of Olive and Howard Street. And like Mike said when he was reading it, the hospices will provide the medical management and all the equipment, the medications, anything like that that's needed. Grace House staff, we're going to be the surrogate family and the roof over their head.
Very good, thank you. Thank you. Well, perhaps whenever we close the public hearing, if there's questions, stick close by. All right, thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of the conditional use request here at 475 North Howard? Anyone else wishing to speak in favor? Anyone? Okay, anyone against? Anyone wishing to speak against 475 North Howard Street? Anyone against? Okay, very good. We'll now open it up to the committee and ask if there's any questions or comments from any of the committee members. I kind of have a question. This is appreciated venture that you're on here, and the nonprofit that operates it, which we're not really looking at that per se. We're looking at the zoning itself. But can you give us a little bit of background on why here, why?
Well, SUMA donated this land.
Okay.
You know, we've been on the journey of getting Grace House going for about 4 years. And there have been two things that have taken longer than we expected. The first was the approval from the IRS. That takes about 9 months, and we thought it would be a little bit quicker. So we hurried up and we formed, and we had our board, and then we waited and we waited. We got our approval from the IRS. Then we started looking for land. And that whole process took a little over a year. And we had a launch party in April of 18. Cliff Devaney from SUMA attended and said, let me take a look at what SUMA has and what we could do. There used to be a medical building there. SUMA tore it down. And when we were looking for land, we wanted to make sure it was centrally located on a bus line and in a place where we would be serving the people. So the bus line, because some of our employees are going to need the bus for public transportation, but also families of people we're serving or friends may need that public transportation. So when you're looking at building a 6-bedroom home that's 1 story, that was hard to find in Akron because it's not just a 2-story home on a little postage stamp lot. You needed a little bit bigger. So it took us some time to find it. SUMA came forward with it, and we were so incredibly grateful. And it ended up being the perfect location.
Yeah, it's a good story. Thank you. And like I said, we're basically focused on the zoning itself, but thank you for that insight. Certainly appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you. Further questions or comments? Okay, very good. Hearing that, we'll invite you back this evening. Okay. Again at 7 o'clock, and we'll make a recommendation at that point. The committee will to all of council.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Sims.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In your discussion, is this just for indigent?
So there are 3 rules that we have to operate under the Ohio Revised Code. Those are really the only regulations. It has to be, the person has to be enrolled in a hospice program, cannot afford a caregiver, or does not have an available caregiver. So the majority of the people we will be serving are going to be the working poor. There may be some instances where maybe some people could afford to pay but we're not charging anybody to come stay in the home. All services are free.
So I too, like my colleague, echo the sentiments. So grateful for the work. And just the mere fact that it's located in the community. I mean, the sounds of community are so, are like balms.
It was important.
So appreciate the work, so thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, absolutely, for your mission. Certainly appreciate that. Short of any other comments or questions, we'll go ahead and move on to item number 4, excuse me, which is authorizing conditional use to construct an oversized accessory use structure, hoop house, at 240 East Talmadge Ave.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, Bhakta Rizal, as the Executive Director of Shanti Community Farms, Inc., is requesting the construction of a high tunnel or hoop house as an accessory structure to a new single-family dwelling they're proposing to construct on the property. The greenhouse would measure 30 feet by 60 feet for a total area of 1,800 square feet. The structure would be no taller than 12 feet 6 inches. It would be constructed with steel framing surrounded by polyethylene cover. The greenhouse will be sited at the rear of the property at a minimum distance of 7 feet from the east and west property line and 15 feet from the back. It's the intention of the petitioner that the high tunnel greenhouse will be used in conjunction with Akron Public Schools' ongoing Farm to School program, which serves schools in the area, including North High School and Jennings CLC. Students will be able to enhance their studies through the planting, maintenance, and harvesting of vegetable plants and herbs that will be grown in the high tunnel. Property has been used for agricultural purposes for the past several years without negatively impacting surrounding residences. Greenhouse is residential in nature, should not have an adverse effect on surrounding uses. Both Planning Commission and Planning staff recommend approval, subject to the condition.
Thank you, Mr. Antonucci. At this time, we'll open up for public hearing and ask if there's anyone here wishing to speak in favor of the conditional use request at 240 East Talmadge Avenue. If you can please provide for us your name and address.
Okay. My name is Bhakta Rizal. I am the Executive Director of Santi Community Farm. Santi Community, I lived in 1183 Clifton Avenue, Akron, Ohio. Actually, we want to build this one because we have a partnerships with North High and then Jennings Middle School. So because in Ohio, the growing season is very, very short. So by the time in the summertime, the children are all out of the schools. So if I build this much structure, we can preserve our plants so that when the students come back from the vacation, summer vacation, they will have at least the opportunity to go in the greenhouse and look at the plant and learn about the plant science and then earth science. So that is why we like to build a little bit of, bigger than what is usually permitted, So that is why we are requesting this to allow us to build so that our children can learn something about the plant and learn about agriculture.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there anyone else here wishing to speak in favor of the conditional use request at 240 East Talmadge Avenue? Anyone else wishing to speak in favor? Anyone? No? Anyone wishing to speak against the 240 East Talmadge Ave? Anyone wishing to speak against the proposal at 240 East Talmadge Avenue? Anyone against? Good. Hearing none, we'll now open it up to the committee and ask if there's any questions. Mr. Swirsky?
Bhakta, this is really interesting partnership that you've developed. A lot of people have talked about things like this for years. I want to thank you for actually pulling it off. Could you tell us a little bit? I know you're going to do shared education programming. Where is the food going to go that you raise?
The food we grow, like we have a lot of things, like we have a farmer market we create, So we are also doing a summer camping right now. It's an ongoing program. So basically the students, we divide the lot and they learn, they grow there because they go 45 minutes right now also in the garden. And then what we do is like they can harvest that vegetable, we'll take to the farmer market. And then farmer market, they will sell it, they'll learn entrepreneur skill as well. We'll teach that to our students. And then whatever they get money out of it, the students can use to buy their stuff, when they go back to the school. Santi Farm is not keeping anything from the students, whatever they do.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Further questions or comments? Ms. Sims?
So I too am excited to see this actually come to fruition. I know it seems like at least 7 to 10 years working with Oscar Bayou and other folks trying to make this happen in North Akron. So Let's Grow Akron has a similar program where they are training young folks in these entrepreneurial skills and using those resources to help support their education in some way. Outside of that kind of value added, are we looking at like canning of potential distributions in that way that are specific to your site with the students? Like a store there?
No, actually we do partner with Let's Grow Akron with Lisa Nunn as well. So we do the similar program, but we have a lot of partners than them, but we are working now mutually, so to create this kind of programs. I didn't clearly understand your question.
So so one of the pieces were other types of value added, similar to what Let's Grow Akron does. So they actually dry fruits, for example, or they dry herbs, and they can jellies from peppers and vegetables, and they market that as a part of Let's Grow Akron. Is the intent to do the same, and the young folks that work in the garden really benefit financially, and they too learn the entrepreneurial skills. And is it the same concept?
This is exactly the similar. Okay. In the long run, we want to do that one as well. Okay. But right now, this is the second year that we are doing with the students, and still we are learning too what kind of program that we can create and be more efficient. So right now, whatever they are growing, like all greens. Like we do beans, all kind of Asian vegetable, and they can harvest and take it. But eventually, yes, we want to do the can and then preserve that one. We want to teach the students that one too. That's why we are partnering with Let's Grow Akron to coordinate this program.
So does this give you an opportunity to grow foods that are indigenous places that some of the students are coming from?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions or comments? Very good. Oh, Mr. Swirsky.
Thank you.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll invite you back again this evening at 7. Now move on to the balance of the agenda. I'm going to request we take time and move into the new list of legislation. Number 2, this is authorizing the Director of the Department of Planning and Urban Development to enter into an agreement or agreements with the local agencies to carry out the Emergency Solutions Grant Program for program year 2019.
Good afternoon, Committee Chair, committee members. Helen Tomick with the Planning Department. The City of Akron will receive approximately $515,000 from the 2019 Emergency Solutions Grant Program. These funds come directly to the city from the Department of Housing and Urban Development. In the 2019 funding cycle, we received 7 applications requesting approximately $532,000. The Planning Department is recommending that 7 homeless service providers are funded this year. This includes 4 emergency shelters, 2 transitional shelter providers, and 1 agency to provide homeless prevention and rapid rehousing services to families and individuals. Shelters will provide services to single women, women with children, single-parent families with children, and 2-parent families with children. The Continuum of Care has identified the need for these types of programs and has approved our recommendation per HUD. Agencies must also have the ability to leverage other funding sources. In addition to the Emergency Solutions Grant Program, we are also asking for an allocation of $30,000 of Community Development Block Grant funds to help with the funding of the Homeless Management Information System, which is also a requirement by the Department of Housing that each Continuum of Care has an HMIS system in place. With that, we ask for your approval. Thank you.
Thank you for that report. Can you tell me a little bit more about the $30,000 for HMIS? That's coming out. That's not coming out of ESG. That's coming out of CDBG.
Correct. So the United Way is our HMIS partner, and they receive Continuum of Care dollars. This $30,000 is used as a match for the continuum of care dollars. I believe Summit County and the city of Cuyahoga Falls is also contributing.
5,000 apiece from
Yes.
what I read in
Yes.
this here. But what is the HMIS? What is it? I mean, if you could
So it's called the
explain that.
Homeless Information System. It has been a requirement since 2002. So every time an individual presents themselves through the centralized intake, HMIS tracks their progress through the system and also tracks the number of homeless episodes that they've had since we've gone live with HMIS. Like I said, it was 2002 or 2003.
Okay, very good, thank you. Further questions or comments? Mr. Swirsky?
Can you give us a ballpark figure on how much the city is spending each year to help homeless people?
I would say about $5.5 million through continuum of care funds, through some state funds, and through the Emergency Solutions Grant Program.
Okay, thank you.
What is the timeline on this thing?
We have not received these funds from HUD yet. I anticipate that should happen sometime in August or September. We just submitted our consolidated plan about 3 weeks ago to HUD, so they need to approve that and get that through the system before we actually receive the dollars. But this is in anticipation of getting those resources within the city, and then we'll disperse them ASAP to the agencies.
Yeah, it doesn't seem as, I mean, there's no reason, I don't see why we would want to take time on it. I'm just thinking, just go ahead and suspend the rules.
That's fine.
my thought.
Yep.
Short of any concerns or comments. And just, this is grant funding, it's reference to homeless, and the continuum of care is basically to a large extent, also the stewards of this as well. So is there any further questions or comments? And if there's not, I'd like to entertain a motion that we accept. Oh, Ms. Sims.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just a quick question. You know, we had the challenges with the homeless camps in Tent City. There was one mechanism that Mr. Lewis was using to help facilitate skills for persons who come through that way. Did we consider using some of those resources to support like community court kind of centers there that kind of help to make sure that once they get in housing, that they're not homeless again, to help them with employment skills and that kind of thing?
So all of the agencies through these funds have case management services available to the clients. And they work with them on a daily basis to make sure, teach them how to save money, how to manage their money, and how to prioritize the utilization of their funds. So within these agencies, they do have those services in place.
So the answer is we didn't necessarily use it directly for the services that they're providing. Question being, I think that was some of the discussion we had around finding more innovative ways to support the homeless population. That gets at that, how do we help to solidify some of those skills so they don't find themselves homeless in the future? Or is there other resources that we're considering?
There are other resources through the continuum of care, and this is separate legislation from the continuum of care legislation, but through the centralized intake process, we are also looking at those skills as well and getting them through the system. And also going out to different homeless encampments and doing outreach efforts to get them into the system.
You look like you
Mr.
wanted to say-
Segedy?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, through the continuum of care, the millions of dollars that Ms. Tomic mentioned, a lot of that is for social services and the type of support that you're asking about. And similarly, some of the permanent supportive housing that's been constructed that this administration supported, part of that model is that those services for, say, job counseling or drug and alcohol counseling, mental health, et cetera, are present on site to assist people. So I think it is, as the name implies, with continuum of care, the housing itself is a very important component, but all of the other support services are equally important for the reasons that you stated.
Yeah, and I appreciate, too, all the millions of dollars that we're spending to house the support. But it seemed to me, and I think that most of us would concur, it just seemed like there was something a little different going on with that aspect of the work that they were doing, that for folks who wouldn't necessarily find themselves in places where you have the case management. It seems like it was almost like the kind of self-supporting kind of systems that we were trying or desired to create to help to support the homeless population, particularly those that don't necessarily find their way into our typical systems. And so
most of the folks in those encampments are part of a system. So what we have in place are mechanisms to encourage them to get out of the current housing situations or lack of and into more permanent, stable environment. So we work closely with community support services. We work closely with United Way, having them do daily outreach and those entities and trying to get those folks into the system and into safe and decent housing opportunities.
thank you.
Further questions or comments? Very good. Hearing none, I'd like to entertain a motion that we suspend the rules with a favorable report.
So moved.
Is there a second? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Thank you. Item number 3 is authorizing the execution of a development agreement with 159 Development LLC or its designee, providing for the acquisition, sale, and redevelopment of property in the downtown redevelopment plan area, finding such property is not needed for public use and related findings, and declaring an emergency. Mr. Beckert is here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. This development agreement is for the law building, which is 159 South Main Street. We also have representatives here from the developer, Lauren Schultz and Brett Trier, if you have any questions after the presentation. Basically, this building is to renovate the law building, which is 200,000 square feet. The project is going to include 112 residential units from floors 5 to 11. The floors will have two two-bedroom units each and 14 one-bedroom units for each floor. The second through the fourth floors are going to have 44,000 square feet of office space. And then the first floor, which will be retail space in the sub-level, which many of you remember the olive tree used to be down there, is going to have 24,000 square feet of retail space. Also, many amenities with this project, as well as to complement the Bowery project, which is across the street. There's going to be a health club, roof garden. They're going to have a demonstration kitchen. They're going to have it's going to be pet friendly. They're going to have an Amazon drop-off. It's going to be a green building through the HVAC systems, as well as water-saving techniques throughout the building, and lighting. Also, this building has also been approved for historical tax credits, so that will be also a help to the developer in the renovation of the building. And basically, those are a lot of the key highlights of what this project is, as well as it's a great catalyst for downtown.
Very good, thank you. Mr. Trier, would you like to make any comments or? Covered. Very good, thank you. So I also understand that from talking and working on this and reading the project that we will be, the developers have agreed to rehabilitate the skywalk between the law building and the county?
That's correct. As part of this project, that they will renovate the skywalk.
Is that now, that's under our ownership, correct? Is that under our ownership, or is that the county, or I'm just
It's
curious.
actually, no, it is actually under the ownership of the law building.
Okay, so
But
so
there
it's
is,
actually,
yeah, a portion of it, yes, and the other
Okay.
portion would be the county. And
Gotcha.
what we are going to do when the renovation is complete, the county, the law building, and the city are going to do one-third for the maintenance in the future.
Okay,
For
good.
the skywalk.
That's brilliant. That's important. Also, in terms of the residential piece, the city tax credit program that we've put in place last year. Is gonna
tax
be-
abatement?
Tax abatement, yes, that's in play as well for the apartment side, right?
Correct.
Yeah, that's correct, and I was just going to add that this is exactly the type of project that we, when we created that program and council approved it, that we wanted to encourage this type of reuse of buildings that were, a different use in a previous life, particularly downtown in this case. So yes, very excited about it.
No, it is. It's, in terms of downtown residential living, this really complements the Bowery Building across the street, and it's going to increase our neighborhood feel for downtown in terms of people living, working, and playing in downtown, which is, this is part of the vision. Is there any questions or comments from anyone? Mr. Swirsky?
The project seems to embody all the different things that council's been asking for: rehabbing of buildings, using historic tax credits, incorporating green. I just wish, is there some place where there's some numbers? on the cost
Yes, the building,
and the
or
percent?
the
You want to go
renovation,
one-
as far as the dollar cost,
Yeah, it's not showing up on our,
the dollar cost for the renovation is about $25 million total.
25 million?
Yes.
Okay. And what, you mentioned the maintenance is going to be shared 3 ways. What about the overall project?
The overall project, what the developer is getting, obviously, is the CRA credits, which are the real estate tax credits, as well as he is getting some of the TIF after that, the tax increment financing, and that is a maximum of $2 million towards the project. And that will be used for some of the public infrastructure around the project, such as sidewalks, such as the vault in the front, and he'll be able to use some of that money. And it's going to be over time, too. It's not going to be in one lump sum.
Okay, very good. Further questions or comments? Mr. Neal?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm maybe missing something. So we're sharing in the maintenance of the building, the upkeep of the building?
No, that's just for the skywalk, which connects the city building, the law building, to the county building. It goes over Church Street. It's just going to be for the maintenance of the skywalk.
And that's going to be a shared responsibility?
Yes, one-third, one-third, and one-third.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just excited about more and more I hear and more I read. It's 112 units altogether
Yes.
of new space in downtown for residential use.
New residential
And
space.
you count that next to the Bowery. What's the
Yeah,
Bowery?
there's about 100 at the Bowery, and then Joel Testa's project at Cascade Plaza, there's around 140 units. So as you indicated before, you can see how all 3 of these combine to add hundreds of residents and create a lot of investment and critical mass in a very small area.
Downtown neighborhood is going to be the hot place here very soon. And this is going to be a key component to that. Excited. But regardless, still, though, I'd like to request that we take time on this, 1 week's time on this, to give everyone an opportunity to digest everything. And should there be any other questions or comments, if you can direct those to Brad and myself, we'll get those answered. And next week, we'll ask for a vote. Short of any other questions or comments from anyone? Okay, very good. Is there a motion for time? Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Ayes have it. Thank you. We're adjourned.
Whenever you're ready, Madam Chair.
I'd like to call the Public Service Committee to order. All members are present. Is there a motion on the minutes from our previous meeting? There's been a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing and seeing none, the minutes pass. On old business, we would like time. That'll be addressed on the 15th of this month. So we will keep that on time until it is addressed. And then in new business, number 4, under public service, is an ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service or his designee to enter into a contract or contracts without the formality of publicly advertising for bids with Ohio Edison Company for the emergency replacement of the transformer at the Oxbow Ball Fields located at 1199 Cahuga Street and declaring an emergency. Mr. Luttle?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. Yes, down at the Cascade Ball Fields, we own the transformer burn up, so we had to get it replaced. We looked at it with our own internal staff, and we looked at the lead time of the transformer. We did talk to Ohio Edison, who had one, so we are contracting with them, and they actually replaced it last Friday. So we were able to use the ball fields over the weekend. It was for all the lights, the parking lot lights, bathroom lights, all the electric at the facility. So.
Bad week before a holiday to have that happen, wasn't it?
Yes.
Long weekend. Okay, thank you, Mr. Luttle. Are there any questions from members of the committee? Are there any questions from members of council in the chambers? Seeing none, I would imagine suspension of the rules since it is an emergency repair that we needed.
That would be fine, thank you.
So I would like to make that motion for suspension of the rules. Is there a second? And I have a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing and seeing none, it'll pass with suspension of the rules. Number 5 under public service is an ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service or his designee to jointly apply for and, if awarded, accept and expend funding for the Akron Metropolitan Area Transportation Study, AMATS, to resurface portions of Gilchrist Road, to expend local funds, therefore, and declare an emergency. Mr. Luttle?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. This is actually for future, a future project, probably not till like 2024. This is just to enter an agreement to put this together. Our portion of this, our estimate would be about $100,000 out of the I think it's $775,000 project. Because, as you know, we own Gilchrist Road from Skeleton to Monroe Falls. We own 100% of that part of the road. And then from Monroe Falls to the Mogador Corp line, we own half. So it's the Corp line starts there and all the way to Mogador Road. So from Monroe Falls Avenue to Mogador Road, we own half the roadway. So that's how we'd split the project up.
Mr. Little, will the $100,000 be primarily for planning of this project, or will it be?
It would be for the implementation. We're not expending any funds right now.
Okay, are there any questions or comments from the committee? Any questions or comments from members of council in the chambers? Hearing and seeing none, what is your pleasure?
Consent would be fine.
Okay. Do I have a motion for consent? I have a motion and I have a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing and seeing none, this will be placed on the consent agenda. Is there anything else to come before the Public Service Committee? If not, we are adjourned.
Whenever you're ready, sir. I'm looking at a new apartment.
We're going to go ahead and move forward and call the public safety meeting to order, please. We did have a meeting last week where we put one item on the consent agenda and we suspended the rules for the other. Can I get approval of those minutes, please? All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? All right, everybody is in attendance. We do have one piece. It's a resolution 2019 opposing and objecting to the renewal application of Spot for Entertainment, LLC, 935 Brown Street, Akron, Ohio, 44311 for Class D1, D2, D3, and D3A liquor permit 8442512, now pending before the Ohio Division of Liquor Control, and declare an emergency, and we have our city prosecutor, Gert Wellms.
Thank you. I appreciate the time. This 935 Brown is a property currently owned and operated by Joe Salem. We attempted to work with the previous owner, Cy Acid, last year to ultimately get Mr. Salem evicted from this property due to some of the safety concerns that we have, as well as the council person has for this area. Mr. Acid did file that eviction. However, Mr. Acid never paid the clerk of courts to have the eviction filed, and the property ultimately got transferred to Joe Salem. So now the property is owned by Joe Salem. The liquor permit is still being operated by Joe Salem. The problems have not changed. Some of the things that we definitely can let the state know, and I'll just read you the last 24 months of stats: assault, theft, felonious assault, discharging firearm, theft, carrying concealed weapon, discharging firearms, criminal damaging, felonious assault with weapons, discharging firearms, felonious assault, disorderly conduct fighting, disorderly conduct by intoxication, obstructing official business. This is the Joe Salem business model. I have had a chance to meet with Councilwoman Samples. I've had a chance to attend one of Councilwoman Samples' town hall meetings, where I have to hear from members of the public that because of this bar, they wake up to shots being fired through their living room walls. So again, it's an ongoing problem. It is a horrible safety concern for this neighborhood. Not only this particular bar, but then they go to an after-hours location a block away on McKinley, which is just a garage that's owned by Gary Thomas, who's a terrible tax offender in our system. And he and Joe Salem had a relationship at 627 South Arlington, one of the previous properties that we've ultimately shut down with a nuisance action. So at this point, I would ask this body to object to the renewal of this liquor permit. We do have a little bit of time, but because of your break, we do need to do everything before your break, because the objections have to be in September, and it just wouldn't coincide well with your break. So consent does work, but any questions, concerns, or if anybody else has a liquor permit you need to object to, please let me know.
Okay, thanks, I appreciate it. Any questions from committee members? Councilwoman Keith, please.
I would like to hear from Councilwoman Samples to give us a little bit more of what you've been hearing and putting up with over the years.
Absolutely. So with Joe Salem seems to seek out bars in certain neighborhoods and find young men to run them for him, but he ultimately is the holder of these permits. We have a long-standing history that supersedes me with Mr. Salem and the prosecutor's office and the police department with his bars way back from when he had the Ace of Spades. So wherever Joe Salem goes, there seems to be a body that follows, and it's consistent and it continues. 627, I think, was just the straw that broke the camel's back. He had 2 young men die within a 46-day period of each other in a bar that he holds the liquor permit for and subleased it to someone, but he ultimately was still running the place. And lo and behold, Gary Thomas owns that place as well. So these two seem to have some kind of partnership with each other, and they both seem to cause a lot of issues for this city, and not in a good way. So because of Brown Street and listening to the residents and just constantly having to hear the horror stories of the speeding up and down their streets at night, them getting on the floor because they're shooting out of their cars, it is unconscionable that they even have to live next to such an establishment. And the fact that Mr. Said said he was going to move and pulled the rug from under us, you know, that was sort of disheartening because we thought we had that one cleared up. Mr. Salem seems to think that we're picking on him, but we're really just trying to keep these neighborhoods safe because he has a history and it's not a good one with the city. So anytime that, whether he's in my ward or another ward, I've just been very vocal about what happens when Mr. Salem comes to your neighborhood. And it's not about shutting down small businesses, it's about keeping those neighborhoods safe because these young people are carrying guns in these places and he's not hiring security. He will not hire Akron police officers. There's no pat down. His facility on Brown Street, a girl actually got shot in the inside. So if you go back from the beginning of when he took over the establishment to date, the number of police reports of just that establishment alone is very, very startling. So for those reasons, and sitting in the hearings with Prosecutor Williams and with Craig, he's just not a good fit for any part of the city. You know, but regardless of what ward he's in, he did seek out Mr. Tropey here a couple weeks ago, trying to move into another establishment, and thank God they called me and asked, and I just told them the truth about his record. And I think that's what we have to do when we find out he's trying to move into one of our neighborhoods, is making sure we're telling these landlords about that record. I mean, they can look it up. They need to know because this is a problem, and, you know, he has bodies behind him, and I think they need to know that as well. So because of that, I am objecting to this permit and probably any other permit that comes through with his name on it. And I appreciate Prosecutor Williams and him constantly keeping me in the loop on when his name comes up on the docket. So hope that helps.
All right, thank you. Any other questions or comments, committee members? No, Councilman Hope.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, thank you for helping with the, and Craig and everything that went on with the Clutch Gentlemen's Club. It does work, going through the process and trying to keep these people from doing business, and it's a shame that they're there, and what they're doing is that they're targeting our city, and they're targeting our people that live in the city, and it makes it unsafe in the neighborhoods and for all of us, and we need to really stand up to them strong and hard. I know with Clutch, there was a lot of issues there, and thank goodness that the Liquor Commission listened on the appeal and upheld that the license was not renewed, and that so I know that Joe Salem, I think he's touched a lot of us in a lot of different wards in a lot of different parts of the city, that in a way that is bad for our city and for our community and our residents. And I wholeheartedly agree with anything that comes in to try and stop Joe Salem in our city. We need to do whatever we can. And thank you very much for everything that you do. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Hope. Any other questions or comments, committee members, council members? So with that, I guess suspension of the rules would probably be the best thing here. Can I get a motion? Motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? All right, so we'll suspend the rules and present that this evening. Thanks for all your work. I appreciate it. Thanks. We're adjourned.
as I find, where is that? Oh, here you go. If I could get a motion for our previous meeting minutes. I got one motion, can I get a second? I got a motion and a second, all in favor? Aye. Okay. We have one piece before us, ordinance ratifying the actions of the Director of Public Service and contracting with M. Campbell Contracting, LLC, for the emergency installation of a liner inside a failing water main on State Route 43, authorizing payment therefore and declaring an emergency. Mr. Leto?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. Yes, up by the water plant underneath of State Route 43, where Ravenna Road and 43 come together, we have a 24-inch water main that we've had several leaks on. So this water main is in a casing under the state route, but you cannot open cut the state route. So we decided to go with this lining process, which worked very well. So we had to dig a pit on each side of the state route, expose the water main, and then we lined underneath the state route.
Okay. Any questions from committee members? Mr. Hope?
Was that the only portion that was lined, is just underneath the state route? There wasn't anything?
Yeah, that portion under the state route was in a casing that was a steel pipe. The rest of the pipe is PCCP pipe. It's a different material, but this is the portion that we've had problems with, yes. That's the only portion we lined.
Okay.
About 140 feet.
That's a pretty good shot.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Yeah, I've seen, different reports and things about that lining, and has it been used?
Not a lot on water line. We've used a lot in sewer line.
A lot in the sewer,
but,
yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
It worked real well.
Well, good. Glad to hear that. Thank you. Thank you.
You're
Madam
welcome.
Chair.
Any other questions from committee members, council members? What would be your pleasure?
Consent's fine.
Consent? Okay, can I get a motion for consent?
Motion for consent.
All in favor? Aye. If there's nothing else coming before us, we are adjourned.
problem. I'll take care of it.
All right, I'd like to call the Budget and Finance Committee meeting to order. Do I have a motion to accept the minutes from the last meeting? So moved. I have a motion and a second. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. All right, for the record, we have all members present with the exception of Ms. Amobian. We have one item coming before us today, and this is an ordinance repealing and replacing ordinance number 429-2018, creating, establishing and recognizing departments, offices, bureaus, divisions, and positions in the classified service of the City of Akron, requiring that only budgeted funded positions be filled and declaring an emergency. Who'll be the first to speak for us today? Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, committee and members of council. On behalf of the administration and the Department of Human Resources, we are submitting these changes to the omnibus ordinance. I can never say that word right. The omnibus ordinance. Most of these changes this time are taking into account the new division of Department of Integrated Development, but just for your, there are a few ordinances that are not a part of that, and I just wanted to kind of go over those really quickly. A lifeguard position, we're changing some of the requirements of the lifeguards, and we're changing the name of it to lifeguard municipal pools. We've lowered the age limit. There's a utilities administrator position, which is basically bringing together all the office functions under an administrator of the department. Then there's the Mayor's Youth Leadership Council intern. That is a position that is available to high school seniors that would give them the responsibilities of the day-to-day operations of government. It pays $9.77 an hour, and it'll be a part of the 2020 budget. We also have a HR employee development specialist, which is basically a trainer to go with to augment our Department of Diversity and Training. We want to bring on a trainer to be in charge of all the training activities, coordinate all the training activities for the City of Akron. Then there's a data analyst position. One of those is in integrated development, so we'll talk about that later. And we're moving the maintenance and repair position into the water department from other departments. So I know that's a lot, but if you have any questions, I'd be happy to entertain them.
So the bulk of the omnibus you see is creating the Department of Integrated Development. So I know the mayor wanted to say a few words before I have I would say a 20-minute or less presentation, and then we want to get into Q&A as quickly as we can.
Thank you.
Well, first, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Before we get started, I think it's important to recognize that Akron's first HR director has been awarded an Outstanding Achievement Award from Crane's Business Daily, and I wanted to make sure that people knew that. But Don Rice received an award from Crane, so congratulations, Don.
Thank you very much.
So as we're going through all this, it is with, thank you. How about a round of applause for him? He doesn't like that, but I felt it positive to embarrass him at some particular point. So what you see before you really is the fruit of about 4 years of conversation and maybe about 2.5 years of hard work of looking at, I think, internally how we do things. And I never thought it was fair to ask things of the community without first asking them what do they want to see out of us, but also us doing things in a way that is efficient and effective to say, okay, how do we address things when it comes to economic development and civic life and all of those things. And so as we put together a team and brought in somebody from the Knight Foundation in Lynn who did a phenomenal job in shepherding us through a process of saying, what do we want to do with these departments? These are all things that we have been doing simultaneously, but oftentimes in silos, and I think that happens in government sometimes, is that people do things and then they move to and it moves to the next department. This is really an integration part of it that makes it a lot more effective on how we, interact with not only, people in the city, but businesses and public life and recreation and Lock 3 and all of those things. And so you don't see this isn't a massive jobs hire, but it really is an effective or an administrative thing. So how do we do things better? And what you're going to see, what you're going to hear over the next 20 minutes is really the byproduct of that. Born out of a recommendation from the Blue Ribbon Commission, and trying to each one of those recommendations that they made, trying to say, okay, what is the best way and most effective way? And we didn't do these things in a silo either. We went and actually talked to other communities, around the country, like Minneapolis, like Detroit, like not necessarily Seattle, Louisville, that are doing some of these things effectively and already, and trying to borrow some of those things. And so this is the product of that. I'm extremely proud of the work that we've been able to do. That's been led by James Hardy, the Chief of Staff, and you'll get a sense of the work that was done and the input that was done from the team. So I'll kick it back over to James and say thank you to Lynn publicly for the great job that you did. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Mayor. So I'm going to be working off of the slide deck that should have come with your legislation. So it should be, it's also in your packet, but it should also be loaded on your iPads if it wasn't. It's in your packet. Actually, no, it should have been loaded on your iPad. So if it's not, I will make copies of it right now.
I don't think it was connected with the ordinance.
It was? It's on there? Okay. No, it's important. Otherwise, it makes the presentation that much more difficult. So that, yes, that's it. That'll work. That'll work too. Okay. I like printed copies, but it should be on your iPad as well. So, just briefly to go over how we got to now. So our process and timeline, the mayor announced the creation of integrated development at his State of the City speech February of 2018. We then went through a 15-month strategic planning process that we launched around May. And as the mayor said, we partnered with Lynn Ross, who is sitting to my left. You also have Lynn's bio in your packet, but just briefly, Lynn has been developing and delivering workshops on a range of topics for folks like Make Room, National League of Cities, People's Liberty. She's held past senior leadership roles as the Vice President of Community and National Initiatives at the Knight Foundation, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Policy at HUD, Executive Director of the Urban Land Institute's Terwilliger Center for Housing. I probably screwed that name up. Yes, see, I was close. And a list of other things. But safe to say, we were very lucky to have Lynn, and we were also very lucky that Lynn's work and our entire strategic process was 100% funded by the Knight Foundation. So we were able to get external dollars to do this and get to today. The process included 3 strategic retreats, alignment with the recreation strategic planning process that, as you know, was going on simultaneously, alignment with the Elevate Akron process, and alignment with OID staff themselves. We have many of whom on our team are here. That's intentional on my part. This process was not top-down. We did everything we possibly could with all staff meetings to get the input of everyone that worked in these departments to make sure that we weren't missing anything and that no stone was left unturned. The results to date and what you'll see today is a vision and mission, core values, goals and metrics, the proposed organizational structure that is in the omnibus, and we are finishing up the draft of a 5-year strategic framework that will lead the work of integrated development for the next 5 years of the city. What's next? Well, we're presenting to you today, hoping to get eventual approval of the omnibus. We will have our final leadership retreat tomorrow, and then finalizing again that 5-year strategic framework, which will take place this month, August, and wrap up hopefully by early September, and then a public rollout in early fall of that final plan, much of which you will see today, by the way. So our mission and vision you see there, this was created by the team. It wasn't something that I came up with or Lynn came up with on our own. We did it together. And it focuses on co-creating with residents and businesses a community that is healthy, equitable, beautiful, and resilient. We do this through a clarity of process, transparent communications, data-driven strategy, and developing a culture of learning and creativity. And we also embrace our history, and our responsibility in stewarding that legacy. Our core values, we took significant time with lots of sticky notes, going through all the different things that we felt as individuals and then as we felt as a team should become our core values, and you see them there. I will go through them, but there are definitions and reference materials for each of them. The first is equity, and you see our definition there, which is in alignment with the National League of Cities policy link and the American Planning Association. We're going to be community focused. Again, we're not going to be doing things to people, but rather with people. Again, we want to steward our legacy that comes back to historic preservation and an honoring of our past. Deliver on our promises. We don't ever want to be in a position in the community or to you at City Council where we offer a plan that isn't fully thought out, that isn't fully baked, that doesn't have a high degree of probability. We want to be strategic. I think we've talked a lot at this horseshoe over the last 4 years, the fact that our resources are what they are. We try and grow them, but it's very likely that they're not going to ever return to what they once were. So how do we use our resources more effectively? A clarity of process. So part of what we found in our stakeholder interviews is that if you're wanting to do development in the city, whether you're a neighbor that wants to see something done in their neighborhood or you're a multi-million-dollar developer, it's not really like there's a front door to the city. You don't know where to go. There's not a concierge service. You don't have sort of a first this, then that type of structure. So we are committing to a clarity of process both internally and externally to correct that, and you'll see some of the things we're doing to get at that in a moment. Transparent communications. A lot of times when I've been out there the last 4 years, I know you hear it all the time, well, I heard a rumor that such and such is buying that property and this is what's going to happen. Being transparent to the extent that we can as to what is going on in the city around development, what is reasonable to expect, and what we can do together. Beauty as a basic right. I talked a lot about this morning when I was meeting with the rec staff. I think because of our resource challenges, Akron and cities like us have become accustomed to the bare minimum when it comes to the public realm and to what our spaces look like. And no matter where you live in the city, no matter how small the park, no matter how insignificant the development might be, the way it's designed and the way it's maintained and the beauty of it should be held at a higher standard. And that's something that you will see in our plan, that we hope to raise the bar for design in our city. I know we all have those wonderful 1960s post-Russian architecture buildings in our wards. We can do better, and beyond just building design, we can do better with landscape as well. A culture of learning and creativity. People have asked me, why OID, why integrated development, why not just keep these things in their current silos? And my answer is usually around, we need a better way of working. We're never going to have the resources we once had. So how do we create a culture of learning and creativity so that people across divisions and across disciplines, planners talking to engineers, engineers talking to landscape architects talking to developers, having these folks siloed off, you get what you get, which is the bare minimum in often cases. And by bringing them together and fostering the more interdisciplinary culture and training opportunities, we really believe that we will be better for the citizens, better for you, and ultimately better for the city. And then lastly, we want to effectively manage our partners. We're not going to be able to do development in the city by ourselves. We need partners, but we also need to make sure that we're managing them so that it's our strategy that's being built out in Akron, not necessarily some external development force coming in. How do we, as much as possible, drive what we want to see in the city versus a partner wanting to impose what it wants to see in the city? So how do we manage that better? So real briefly, I'll be going into our goals. Our entire strategic framework is really built around 5 key goals. Each of the goals is designed to help the team deliver on our core values, organize our current work, prioritize and identify future work, and then internally coordinate to make sure that we're delivering. Goal 1, and I will read these just briefly, OID will advance a visionary plan to make downtown Akron a destination for all Akronites and visitors, a hub for economic activity and jobs, and a fully functioning 24-hour neighborhood for downtown residents. This goal serves as our focus for city resources and leveraging key internal and external partners to help grow the residential population of the city from the center out and to help strengthen downtown as our largest job hub. So this is really a goal of saying, how do we fully implement the downtown vision and redevelopment plan that this council has formally adopted? Goal 2, OID will advance in partnership with the County of Summit and Greater Akron Chamber the successful implementation of the Elevate Akron plan to transform economic opportunity within the city and across the region. This goal recognizes that the city plays an incredible role as an economic engine driving the entire region, and the critical role that we play in making sure that the entire Elevate Akron strategy is successful long-term. Goal 3, OID will advance strategic placemaking and placekeeping policies, plans, and practices, that's a lot of alliteration, designed to enhance the design and livability of Akron's neighborhoods, including downtown, for current residents and attract new residents to grow the population to 250,000 by 2050. This goal is not anything new to you. We've been talking about it. It's the mayor's North Star. But this goal is really about Akron's neighborhoods, of which downtown will become one. But it underscores that the economic and social future of Akron is very dependent on stabilizing and growing our population and creating the density necessary to attract and retain the businesses, as well as social capital to support the public life and the civic institutions that we all love in our different wards. Goal 4, OID will advance its mission by effectively leveraging the skill sets and insights of a range of partners and initiatives, as well as creating, again, that culture of learning and creativity and knowledge sharing that builds team capacity and supports interdisciplinary problem solving. This goal embraces our philosophy that a new way of working is needed, and by engaging more effectively with external partners and better supporting the ongoing learning and training of our own staff, we will build capacity without necessarily building our ranks, if you will. And then finally, Goal 5, OID will advance its mission for a more equitable Akron by developing and implementing policies designed to alleviate inequity in all its forms, and by being intentional in building and sustaining an OID team capacity in the areas of equity, diversity, and inclusion. OID needs to be more reflective of the community it serves. We do this, I think, in 2 ways. One, we need to build staff capacity in training, and we've talked a lot about that around the horseshoe, and we will be seeking external funding as well as asking budget and finance for funding for training around implicit bias, racial equity, a whole host that HR is working on citywide. But we also have to look at our pipeline for people coming in. We are not a very diverse staff from really any measure that you look at. And so how do we build a pipeline so that over time, integrated development reflects more appropriately the neighborhoods that we're serving? So next slide just sort of goes through our work and how we're prioritizing that. I won't go through them in one-by-one detail, but I just want to point out that all the daily work that these departments do, so putting together the HUD budget, putting together CD budgets, putting together continuum of care, the summer concert series with rec, all of these daily things are still going to go on, they're still going to get done, and in many cases, they're still going to look and feel very similar in terms of how you interact with integrated development. But it's important to note that we are reaching higher, and there are what we call strategic initiatives or special projects that really showcase this new way of working, and you know many of them. Akron Parks Challenge, Great Streets, some of the things that we've rolled out, but this is what this slide talks about. We also, at the bequest of the mayor, wanted to have hard and fast measurable outcomes so that we can say whether we are achieving our goals or we're not achieving our goals. And I want to go through those briefly. The first slide, which is in green, measurements for downtown neighborhood development, really go with Goal 1, obviously. Collectively, these measures will track downtown's ongoing transformation into an active, livable neighborhood and job hub over time. We want to see these measures show an increase in the number and mix of housing units and a reduction in the overall commercial vacancy rate. The next set of metrics really is trying to measure income equity and economic security. Collectively, these measures track our ability to build and sustain an inclusive economy that reduces poverty and economic inequities. Over time, we want to see these increasing household incomes as well as livable wages. We also, though, want to see a closing of the gap in the income inequality between Akron's black and white households, and greater economic security for all families is what we seek to look for in those metrics. Measures for economic growth, you see them there. Over time, increase in the GMP, the gross metropolitan product, will demonstrate that Akron is growing economically. Growth in young firms will indicate that our economic development efforts via Alleviate Akron are working around innovation and entrepreneurship. And robust participation in the labor market will hopefully show that Akron is growing as a job hub in the region and that people are finding meaningful employment, not just employment. Measures for Akron's population growth and livability. Over time, we want to see the elimination of concentrated poverty. Director Segedy talks a lot about this. We've talked a lot about this. It's not good for anyone to live in places of concentrated wealth or concentrated poverty. There needs to be more of a mix. And so how do we build neighborhoods in a city that grow our population as well as maintain and sustain critical livability factors, things like beautiful parks, tree canopy, our walk score, our transit score. So many of our residents rely on Metro Bus. Our score, just letting you know, our baseline is so-so, we're average, but how do we work with Don Dissler and Metro for those folks that really rely on that service to increase that score over time? We want to see more residential tax abatement applications showing that we have more new market residential coming into the city. So those are some of the things that we'll be measuring there. And then lastly, second to last, our measures for investment, partnership, and development. I've been asked many times by many of you, can we please measure, James, for every dollar that the city puts in, what are we getting from private investment? We're going to measure that now. So every year, I'm going to come back to you and let you know, for every dollar we put in at this horseshoe for real estate investment, what did we get back in ROI? That's something that other cities measure quite frequently. We can do it. We haven't been doing it, but we're going to start doing it. We also want to look at some critical factors that dictate, in my view and in our view, our market growing. We rely heavily on new market tax credit, we rely heavily on low-income tax credits, and we rely heavily on historic tax credits. You've seen those, I think, in probably every development deal that's come before this horseshoe. We need to track those, because if we're seeing a downturn, that means that that's a critical piece of our development pie that we're not getting, and we need to either lobby more or increase the quality of our applications. Subsequently, if we're seeing them in high numbers, we're cooking with gas. So we're going to start measuring that so that this council and this city can start to get an ROI. That was nice. That was good. Can start to measure ROI. And then finally, we're going to measure our own team development. We want to measure our professional training budget. We will be asking external partners as well as budget and finance to help us create a training budget so that we can get after some of these strategic priorities. Employee satisfaction. We are going to be, I think, the first, but hopefully not the last department that is going to annually ask its employees how well we're doing and whether they feel like they're getting what they need out of their job, whether we're asking enough of them, whether we're asking too much of them. How are we doing as managers and leaders, and are we communicating effectively? We want to measure that over time. We want to see high participation from employees in training, and then, as I said, over time, we want to see our staff demographics diversify, and we have some goals around that. So finally, the structure. And I've asked 4 of our managers to help me out with this when we get to their respective slides. I'll ask them to come forward. But just to give you a basic overview, this organizational structure was co-created with the staff. Again, this was not a top-down approach. Lynn took us through a 15-month process to get to now, looking at other best practices, figuring out, talking to the folks that have been here a lot longer than me, what's going to work, what's not going to work. It's designed to get the best out of our folks. It's designed to be aligned with our mission, vision, values, and goals. It supports improved transparency, communication, and coordination, And I think it's most important that while we looked for best practices and we used many, it is authentically Akron. If it wasn't going to work for Akron, we talked about that openly. Just because it worked in Minneapolis or Louisville or Lansing, Michigan, doesn't mean it's going to work here. But I know sometimes we talk around the table about who else is doing this, those types of things. We wanted to take the best of what we saw, but we also wanted it to work for Akron. So very briefly, the next slide, you see sort of the general overview of the structure for OID. Economic opportunity is really not a city division, which is why you don't see that on the omnibus. It's our contribution to Robert DeJarnette and the department that he is building at the chamber that will also help us in our efforts to expand opportunity for all Akronites. We're going to have a development division, a division of business retention and expansion. We will still have a planning and urban development division, and that has to remain, as you know, because it's in the charter. So that will still remain. We will have a division of development engineering. We'll have a downtown operations division and the division of recreation and parks, which will both work together to create a public life unit, as you see there in purple, but they will be separate divisions under OID. And then obviously there'll be an administrative division like all other departments to capture admins and other associated positions we might have. Just briefly, before we go through each individual division, while the organizational structure identifies current and future staffing needs for OID, we do not anticipate having a budget that has significant new hires in 19 or 20. This is about doing more with less. This is about leveraging what we have to achieve greater outcomes. That's not going to mean I'm not going to be asking audit and budget for strategic positions, because they're in here and you'll see them. But it's also recognition that we have to be strategic in our request, and we have to be realistic, that this is not, as the mayor said, a hiring spree. This is about how do we do more and get more out of the folks that we have and support each other in their roles. Our goal is to seek external resources for a cohort of fellows across OID to help implement the strategic framework. We have been in talks with several philanthropic partners who are interested in supporting this work as we implement. We know that, for example, training budgets are what they are, so we want to get what we can get out of our own coffers, but we want to augment those dollars with some external dollars if we can. We anticipate those fellows would be on 1, maybe 2-year fellowships with us and be very strategic, for example, housing. We, with the Planning to Grow Akron report, have been taking great strides in terms of transforming housing in the city, but we know, we've talked about it a lot, what do we do about the housing that's not ready for demolish and it's not new housing? It's right on the edge. How do we get after that? What are things that we're missing? What should be our strategies for that? So how do we take Planning to Grow Akron to the 2.0 phase? That's an example of how we might leverage a fellow. And again, in supporting Goal 5, we also plan to develop a more robust internship program by cultivating and deepening university relationships, specifically with historic black colleges and universities, to see if there's a way that we can improve our pipeline in OID for the workforce of the future. When I was at UA, I did my internship at the State House and I stayed at Ohio State. There's got to be a way that we can do that, and Abe Westcott and I are working on that as we speak. And so with that, I want to invite Abe up, actually, and just briefly, 2 to 3 minutes, go over the division of development and then the BR&E division.
Good afternoon, Committee Chairman and committee members. I'm fortunate to be part of a team which contributed to the structure of the new Office of Integrated Development. It's a combination of several departments working together to deliver services for the benefit of our Akron residents. This combination is critical in that it will increase communications and coordination of economic development functions within the regions. In addition, many of our activities, especially real estate related activities, we are coordinated out of a single office. In front of you, you'll see a table of organization, the development, which is organized in 2 areas. The first is business retention and expansion, and the second is policy and development. This is slide 21. The Business Retention and Expansion Division is structured to support the Elevate Akron plan and to create work similar to the work that's being conducted with the Chamber and the county. Sam DeShazer will lead that division and will operate as a development concierge. Brad Beckert will assist Sam in this function. Policy and Development Division, led by Adele Roth, will focus on finance, innovation, and entrepreneurship. Heather Rochek will lead the group for innovation and entrepreneurship. I will be coming over from the Planning Department along with several other staffers to continue the land use and real estate functions of the city. With this structure, I believe the Office of Integrated Development will improve the delivery of numerous projects as they relate to economic and community development functions. The new structure should be nimble to carry out the 5 key goals of the office. I support the concept of the Office of Integrated Development. OID will prove to be a great example of how to serve the city and its residents. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dave. I'd like to ask Helen Tomic to come up and just briefly go over the changes to planning and urban development.
Good afternoon, committee chair, council members. Helen Tomic with the new long-range planning division. So a couple of years ago, there was an unofficial consolidation of comprehensive planning and capital planning. Those 2 divisions will now be combined into a new long-range planning division. Having said that, as James indicated, we will still continue to do the same work that we've done in the past, putting together a capital investments budget, putting together a 5-year consolidated plan, a 1-year consolidated plan, putting together our relationship with the continuum of care, the Emergency Solutions Grant Program, and everything else that's associated with CDBG, home, and the ESG program. We will also, through the planning department, we will still continue looking at our zoning division, looking at zoning changes and making those coordinate better with the long-range vision of this department and the OID goals. With the new changes through OID, it is very obvious we are looking at a common vision and a common goal with better coordination with the engineering department and the development division. And I think with that coordination, there is going to be greater accountability as we move forward with our plans to grow the city. One other thing that I wanted to touch upon, Jason, Heather, and I and Kurt had an opportunity to meet with some representatives of Lansing and Rochester, New York, and we kind of talked about this a little bit, and I will say that they are very intrigued with this concept. The National League of Cities was also part of those conversations, and Rochester is really taking a close look at this OID transformation and taking it to some of their folks as they look at adopting some of what we're doing as well. So we're really excited about that. Thank you.
I'll ask Michelle DeFiore to come up as our new manager for development engineering in the development engineering division.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Michelle DeFiore. I'll be the manager of the Development Engineering Division, and we're going to be coordinating a lot with the Engineering Bureau and our strategic long-range planning department as we develop new projects and scopes of work. We want to make sure we're being strategic, that we're focusing on our core values with beauty as a basic right and hearing from our constituents and residents and everyone what is actually desired in those projects. One of our biggest programs is the Great Streets Akron program, where we're working on 11 neighborhood business districts. We hired a coordinator who's helping us manage those efforts and lead those efforts. And again, this is really working with our businesses and our neighborhoods on where they're at and what they each need. Some of them have a neighborhood leader, and some of them need a neighborhood leader. So we've been meeting with them and working with them to determine what their needs are. The city arborist will also fall in this division, again, with an eye on beauty as a basic right. You know, how do we look at our streetscapes? How do we look at our public spaces? So we're really looking forward to the opportunity to having a strategic focus.
And then finally, I'd like to ask Brittany Schmokel if she could come up and just briefly go over the Division of Recreation and Parks, as well as how Rec and Lock 3, in the pursuit of public life and improved public life, will go about that.
Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the committee. So public life, and many of you probably already thought that Lock 3 and the Recreation Bureau were under the same division. I know that that's a common thing that people think, and now we would be. And we look forward to enhanced collaboration together. Under public life, you would have downtown operations, which would be managed by Tish Jernigan, and she would oversee Lock 3, the Downtown Operations Group, and the Akron Civic Theater Partnership. And then there would be Recreation and Parks. And I would oversee the different divisions that we currently oversee. We are looking at taking the active adults position and turning that into a wellness program coordinator position, where we're focusing on neighborhood needs for wellness and fitness at the neighborhood level. When you look at the chart, you do see that there is an existing parks position, and parks is in the title. The Parks Maintenance Division will remain under public service, and they do a wonderful job with our parks. What we will be focusing on is the strategic plan for those parks and programming at those locations. So that's what Recreation and Parks will be focusing on. And I know together we're looking forward to increased collaboration and resources in the Office of Integrated Development. And when you're looking at stronger neighborhoods and more livable neighborhoods, you can't do that without the Division of Public Life and the offerings that Tish and I will have. Thank you.
Agreed. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll end with just saying that our request is to affirm the Department of Integrated Development as you see it in your omnibus. We are already working in many respects in this way. This is really a ratification and endorsement of support for this new way of working. But I will say that I am immensely proud of this team. Everyone behind me, everyone seated here, there wasn't a moment where anything was shoved down anyone's throats. It was such a wonderful process to be a part of, and it is an honor if we move forward with this, which I believe we will, to be the city's first deputy mayor for integrated development. With that, Mayor, I saw you turn that on.
Yeah, I wanted to thank again the Knight Foundation for, I mean, this was a long process in going to them and giving them ideas about, you know, where they structurally can be involved and how they can help fund this. And they were pretty much in pretty quickly and right away, and wanted to see us to do some things about how we, you know, integrate either internally and how we outface with the public and how we're touching each individual person in their lives and in their neighborhoods. They were, you know, this is a founding city for them, and, you know, Jack and John Knight's offices are right down the street, and they're extremely, I'm not going to say worried, but they want to see us do well, and so they really bought into this a lot. I can't thank them enough for funding this, and we should all thank them publicly about helping us move through the next process, so thanks.
And with that, we're happy to take any questions.
Where to begin? Questions are, it's like, okay, after a few years, I had all the departments straightened out in my head.
I know.
Okay, here's who we talked to that, so re-education, I'm sure, for a lot of us. Questions or comments? The first comment I would have, or question I would have, is this is going to take some coordination with the county, too. When you talked about having a front door for somebody coming in doing some development, there'll be some coordination that has to happen with the county along with that.
Certainly. I mean, the spirit of Elevate Akron is that, again, how do we break down the silos between the city, the county, and the chamber? Because there were multiple doors, right? Mm-hmm. We now have something called the BR&E team, which is representation of the city, the county, and the chamber, and they work together on projects. But I should be clear, and I want to be clear on this. Sam's team is a city team. They're going to be working on city projects. They're going to be out there pounding the pavement for the city. But when they do that, we also are going to be siloing off from what the county can bring to the table with what the chamber can bring to the table. So it's really, their team mirrors what the county has reorganized at, which is what the chamber has reorganized at. So each of the three entities have a BR&E team and a lead, and they work together. But Sam will still be, and anyone who knows Sam, and he's right, I mean, Sam is all about Akron and about advancing the region. So we will still have our own city team out there pounding the pavement.
Would we be able to have a week here and digest some things and
Please, I'm not asking I should have said that right up front, not asking for any immediate passage today. So it's really the committee's pleasure. We just wanted to get it before you with ample time before the break.
committee members, comments or questions? Any other council members that might have comments or questions? Mr. Fusco.
This, for the ROI, thank you.
You're welcome.
And I'd like to see, I have some ideas about some others, perhaps, that you may want to entertain.
Sure.
The one thing, though, and this is, I appreciate all the effort of all the city employees and what you'd said in terms of bottom up, in terms of developing strategy, and also the, in essence, what you're doing is changing the culture of the city employees and the way we do business, and trying to, and that was something else I noticed here, was maybe tweaking a little bit in terms of welcoming. We talk about that a lot, and I don't know if that's possible or what have you, but just adding maybe something with the welcoming piece in it. But having gone somewhat through this many years ago, not to this extent obviously, but changing the culture and including the employees and having them drive the boat, if you will, you did it right, and I'm looking forward to seeing this implemented.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you, Councilman.
The dollar today, you said there would be a report as far as every dollar the city invests. Do you see that happening end of fiscal year, beginning of fiscal year? How will that run?
So our goal is to set baselines between now and the end of the year. So our first report to council will be baselines. But then the idea would be, before we break for the holidays, that we would have sort of an annual report from OID looking at these metrics. So I would say fourth quarter of each year would be when I would expect to be putting out a report.
A lot for us to take in here. Who should we direct? To your office
Please.
Or to the respective?
Please send it to me. If you have specific questions for a manager, they're all more than willing to chat about it. But if there's overall sort of strategic questions, more than happy to take them myself.
Okay.
Just as a caveat too, those ROIs and those certain things that come down the pike that we ask you to approve, those are all built on the same structure. You will find some that are a great ROI and others that we may have more invested than not, but rather than lose. And so we never try to bring you those things, but they're not all apples to apples. That's all. So as you consider those things, just know that they're not all built on the same structure.
Sure. I'm assuming as far as the ROI goes that we're not just going to have one big number dumped on us. We're going to be looking at it project by project.
No, our goal would be to track those real estate projects and give you comparisons. To the mayor's point. We may have made a decision together because if it's an educational goal we're trying to reach versus a jobs goal. So we want to be transparent with how we're describing the metrics as well.
Okay, very good. Ms. Keith?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question about the end indicates the position is new. Does that mean a new hire, or does it mean that someone is being moved from one category to another one to fill this title?
That would mean a new position. It could be someone that could bid in for that internally. I should note that the only new position that is funded currently is the Econ 1 position in Sam's team. All the others are on the wish list. So it's including the fellows, which wouldn't be city funded, they'd be grant funded if we could find the money. But to your question, Councilwoman, it denotes a new position that we would like to create, or if it is created, it would be open and promotional, or promotional only. We'd take a look case by case.
And then I'll send my other one to you.
Please.
And to that end, we will try our darndest as far as if something is created at some particular point, is there somewhere else where it's just not a function that cities do anymore? We don't need to fill the statistician 4, or something else, and so it is hopefully a net neutral on all of those things too. That'll be a ROI for ourselves, is that filling a new, but not necessarily backfilling an old. Trying, okay.
Maybe I won't send this to you, but I thank you for that. I did note when you said we're going to do more with less.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I have to tell you, I think all divisions seem to do more with less.
Yeah.
So I don't know how you can dig deeper into the bone, but since they told you how they can do it, I just believe that with Parks and Rec, I have a difficult time because I think they are our face. They are the city's face, and they have such a hard time with promotions because they're seasonal, they're part-time seasonal, and I have to tell you, I want to champion everyone that's in that group.
Yeah.
I'm glad I mean, it's a nice pat on the back to say doing more with less, and I don't mean this as a backhanded compliment. I mean that if we're going to do this good, then let's also look at that part too, because I just think something needs to change. And you inherited, Mayor, you inherited this system that has come down, but I think it needs to be looked at.
No, and I think that was the point from the state of the city as far as elevating recreation to a place where it should be. And that's looking at it in a different way. And to me, parks aren't necessarily, I think growing up, park was a place where we went and did a sport, and that's what it was. Public life is a little bit different. It might just be where you just want to be. And whether that is a neighborhood park or whether that is Lock 3, it's a different feeling of just not going to play soccer or baseball or basketball, or whatever it may be. Recreation is all part of that too. And so I think doing the recreation strategic plan and elevating recreation to where it is within this in integrated development gives it that cachet to say, okay, how does it become more important? How do we do better with seasonals? How do seasonals get full-time quicker? And those are all changes through HR that Mr. Rice is looking through to be able to do that. If we have a seasonal that does well, for 2 or 3 years, I want to be able to move them next. We want them plowing streets and working in the Recreation Bureau. Those are all those strategic things we're trying to get rid of. That's also going through the civil service and eliminating some things, not eliminating civil service, but making it easier to be able to do that.
I appreciate that answer because they truly are.
Yes.
They are the backbone of what people see their tax money go for, not just for roads or whatever, but they're kind of like the massage of everything. And you look at these people that are dedicated, as you well know, have been working for the parks for 20-some years, yet to get to the next level, they have a difficult time because of how things are written. So I thank you for taking a look at that, and thank you for addressing that. Because it wasn't meant as a backhanded compliment. It was meant as a compliment for the city and especially for that group.
And I want to say too that my job as the deputy mayor is to, fight like hell every budget time for the divisions that I have, and I believe strongly in them. And the one thing that we're already seeing, which is exactly why we wanted OID, is by Brittany sitting at our table over the last year, we've opened up conversations about how do we really use CD money? What is HUD's policy on helping to improve a community center? We're having communications that we weren't necessarily having before because we weren't all together under a unified mission. So there are additional resources even over and above general fund tax dollars that we're looking at that can be devoted because we're all in one unit. But by no means, when I say do more with less, my job is to grow appropriately what we do for the city because it is so critical. And I took the liberty of looking through all the different departmental budgets and putting them together because that's what you'll see next year, and I just wanted to see what it will be. We will still be 5% of the general fund budget. But when you think about what is in integrated development, you're absolutely right. There's so many front-facing critical pieces, but it's a testament to these folks and to the folks behind me for all they've done with what they've got. But I think together, and to the mayor's point, we've got some really excited funders that at least for the next 5 years, we might be able to get them excited about helping with some of these things. But even if we didn't, having conversations like the one that Helen and Brittany now have about how can we help to improve community centers with CD money wasn't happening. And not because the two of them didn't have the idea, but because there just wasn't that day-to-day interaction in a department that you get with two leaders working together.
Was there, from the folks out here, and I think you just described that with Brittany and Helen, was there a discovery of, oh, we didn't know, you talked about silos, we didn't know that you did that, we didn't understand?
They're laughing and nodding their heads, so yes. I think that
I think, the folks that I'm working with have been here longer than I've been here. They'll be here, some of them probably after I'll be here. They know more about this stuff than I do. And it's been a treasure going through this process, truly, with them, because they really have been developing a lot of what you see here, and a lot of the we think this can work better type of mentality. And so I do think, just from observing it, that there have been interactions between our leadership in the city and staff that have brought forth ideas that we've implemented already that wouldn't have happened had we not been more efficient with our time and working together.
Wonderful. Any other questions or comments? Mr. Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I commend you on just the restructuring process. I know anytime you change the culture in anything, it's difficult. My questions are the same. And the one is, in here, the word equity is used several times. And it says our teams utilizes an equity lens. From legislation it comes to, I've always asked, what is our definition of equity? We have legislation that comes through and we pass it with that word in there. And equity, I'll say as a nation, we're evolving in our understanding of that. So, again, my question is, what is our city's definition of equity? And what is the racial equity lens tool that we are utilizing? Because if the administration is utilizing a tool, council should be utilizing a tool. That should also be communicated, and I'm sure it is, through all of it, from the ground up through all of our departments, even with our judicial system, just sharing, hey, this is where we're coming from the legislative side, so that we're all speaking the same language. So my question is, when we say equity, what do we mean? And what is the racial equity tool that we're using?
Sure.
So, I don't know if you're prepared to answer that now, or if that's another, okay.
I'd like to answer, but then I invite Lynn, who's worked with us on it, has a lot more experience than I do. But we are defining equity in this plan. You'll see on slide 5, but also in your handout, we did a footnote. It's a longer definition, and it's in keeping with, again, the definition from the National League of Cities Policy Link and the American Planning Association. The tool we're going to be using is REI, Racial Equity Training from the Racial Equity Institute. I know that Don Rice is also working to do that citywide, but we're seeking grant funding even as we're putting together that budget to make sure that our folks are trained. But it's a framework from REI, but it's also a definition that's been widely adopted by multiple organizations. But I'll defer to Lynn because she's been working on a lot of that.
Sure. So another hat that I wear is I was the co-chair for the American Planning Association's first equity guide on planning. So that is another tool that's a set of guidance across all of the issues that OID is going to be working on, is already working on. That has a set of very specific policy guidance from everything from public space to housing to transportation. So that is another tool that is already available that follows the definition that we've put forward here, which is a fundamental one, right? Equity is fundamentally about fairness, and is it just, right? And so that's the set of tools, and that's the lens through which we've looked at this entire process for OID. I mean, we defined core values at our very first retreat, which was over a year ago, and equity was the very first thing that went up there with this definition. So this is about closing gaps wherever we see them. This is about equity across all aspects, but really digging deep first on racial equity, because that also ties into the Elevate Akron plan. But the definition that we've put forward is one that is supported by the American Planning Association. It's one that's supported by Policy Link, which is sort of the grandmother, if you will, of the equity movement in the United States. And it's one that's very much aligned with the REAL initiative from the National League of Cities.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, because there's 3 parts. If I may ask, best practice, most folks are developing a racial equity checklist, so that as something passes through policy, as it passes through legislation, we're able to make sure that we're meeting all of our goals. I would ask, and that will help with the part that's in the first paragraph where we talk about transparency. It will help us to be able to communicate with each other and with those who we serve that we're meeting those goals. My Just two other things. One is on a transparent communication. Love to, at another time, talk about what are those tools that we're going to utilize to make sure that we're transparent. On our side, one of it is our constituents should be able to follow legislation through the process. When you look at Austin and other communities, and I know that's something that falls on council, people are able to follow the legislation and make their comments. They may not be able to see the back end, but they can at least follow it. Many times we have folks that come down here and say, hey, they don't know about the legislation until it comes to the transparency of the process. The other thing is the budget process. Now, I know we've had much discussion. There's a difference between having a checkbook, but actually having a budget where people can follow what goes through. So I'm very interested in seeing what tools we will utilize to be transparent and just to improve overall communication within the whole organizational structure. And then last but not least, when we talk about equity, some things that we've talked about, that we've asked about. One, in-house, looking at just our structure and those who have been a part of this organization for a long time and have never gotten past seasonal. It's not because they don't want to get past seasonal, but there's something inherent within our process that has locked them out from full-time employment and the benefits that go along with that. We need to be looking at transparently, how is that, what has hindered them from having full access to all the opportunities? There's people that have been here 10, 12 more years. What is it? If it's something in their personal development, we need to have something in place to develop them. But I think if we keep them along for 10 to 12 years, they have to have some value. So that's number one. And then the last thing is we need a tool, because we've asked, and I know we're working on it, but we haven't seen anything yet, is what is our, and this goes directly to the Elevate Akron, the level of engagement for minority businesses, more specifically black businesses, when it comes to contract opportunities. We need a real tool of looking at that. And then when we pull the lens back, we could just look at our organizational structure and see what the makeup is of the staff and the employees. But that's what I ask, because I mean this is heavy lifting. It's heavy lifting, and again I commend you. But now that this structure is put in place, all of us have to make sure that this plan succeeds. One is having a true understanding of what we mean when we say equity. And then the other thing is having the tools in place to make everything transparent so everybody can be on the same wavelength. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Samples?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a few questions, piggybacking off what Councilwoman Keith was speaking on, where it says action taken. I want to get a little bit of clarity on when we talk about jobs created. I have like 4 of them here to say new position established. Are those positions already in place, or are those are what you call your wish list ones? Because they say established. We have some that say like create new department, create new division, but then we have 4 of them that say established. So are those ones we are looking for people, or you already have people in those positions?
So I think that's Mr. Rice's document, but it's not, when we say established, it just means that that position, that title has been created. So for example, Helen, Ms. Tomic has been wearing 3 hats, now it's just be 1. Right. But we needed to establish the manager of long-range planning position. So it's, most of the establishments, correct me, Director Rice, are just that.
Yes, they are. They're just that. They are. We're looking to create the position in the omnibus so that we can move forward with the potential hiring of those positions.
Okay.
I think the only real retooling of a position, if you will, is what Ms. Schmokel talked about in terms of taking the active adults coordinator position, turning it into more of a neighborhood-based wellness and fitness position, which is a pretty big change from what the original coordinator position. Everything else definitely has new job descriptions. HR and the Civil Service Commission has done a wonderful job with that, but it's not a rash of new jobs and new hires. It's just a redefining of roles and responsibilities.
Okay.
And I would add just to that, on this document that my office created, where you see the word established, these are positions that generally aren't in the Integrated Development Division. They're in HR. They're across the citywide.
Okay.
rather than being in integrated development specifically.
Okay, so my last question is, not the utilities office administrator or development specialist, those seem like jobs that would make a little more money than a mayor's youth leadership commission. Did you say like $9.22 an hour? Is that what you said? Did I hear that? For the amount on the youth leadership?
That would be $9.77 an hour, and these are for high school seniors.
I would make a suggestion, just because if we could think about making that $15 an hour, if I'm a kid, $9 an hour, I'd be like, $15 an hour would give some incentive and initiative for a kid to want to apply for it. Plus, $15 an hour is what the minimum wage should be anyway, but that's just me. But something to think
Point
about.
taken, point taken.
Okay,
We talk about the number of jobs that are available in the city right now that start below $15 an hour. There are very few.
Right.
Maybe there's a few classifications left, and we don't even have to fill it. So it's not like that. So maybe it would be good practice to not even start, but we'll take a look and we'll get back.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. If I can get a motion to go ahead and refer this to regular agenda. A motion, a second. All in favor? Great. Yeah, and we'll direct questions your way. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. A whole lot of work here. Nice to talk to one another, isn't it? And learn some things. So, and we are adjourned 4:03. Thank you.
Thank you very much.